morning. Welcome to Chalice Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We are a community of diverse beliefs and experiences, nurturing the liberal religious spirit and united by our desire to grow in love and in service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your life's journey, you are welcome here. Whether you gather with us every Sunday, once or twice a year, or are with us this morning for the first time, we are glad you are here. I'm Reverend Sharon Wiley, Chalice's minister. Our worship musician this morning is Justin Gray. Welcome to this online worship service. Welcome to those of you watching live on Sunday morning using Zoom, and welcome to those of you watching the recording of this service later on Chalice's YouTube channel. For those of us using Zoom, please notice on your menu that there's a button that says CC Live Transcript. This is Zoom's closed captioning service, and you can click on that to hide the subtitle or show the subtitle as you choose. You're in control if that's on or off for you. Also on your menu is the chat button. You'll see people saying hello in the chat box. For those of us who like to use it during the service, which we're welcome to do, be sure when you post that you use that little blue drop-down menu to select panelists and attendees. It's easy to forget because it auto sets to panelists and you have to change it. If you only post to panelists, it only comes to me and I won't see it during the worship service. So let's use chat to all talk with each other. So let's give ourselves a big hug of hello and welcome. If you share space with someone who consents to a hug, you can give them a hug too. Finally, I want to especially welcome those of you who are newcomers at Chalice this morning. Towards the end of the service, I'll put a link in the chat box for adding your name to our email list. Our weekly email is the best way to get information about the many online groups and activities we offer. Most of those are still using Zoom. We might see that start to change, but the weekly e-news is where you'll hear about that. So once you're on our email list, you'll receive information, also receive information about our monthly gathering for newcomers. Now, let's take a breath together. We begin our service by acknowledging that wherever each of us is watching, if we are in what is now called the United States, then we are on land stolen from indigenous peoples. Our congregational home in what is now called Escondido is on land that is part of the traditional territories of the 12 bands of the Kumeyaay Nation and the 7 bands of the Payamkashum, also called the Luiseno. Land that is sacred to us now was stolen from people for whom that land was and is still sacred. In recognition that we are the beneficiaries of a history of colonization, we have made financial donations in the past year to 2 local indigenous-led organizations, California Indian Legal Services and the Kumeyaay Diegueño Land Conservancy. It is our hope at Chalice to find our way to right relationship with local tribes. Now we light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The flaming chalice was first used during World War II by the Unitarian Service Committee as a symbol of life-saving refuge for people fleeing persecution in Europe. May our chalice flame burn brightly, that all who are seeking may find us. The words of our call to worship come from the Reverend Tim Haley. Amid all the noise in our lives, we take this moment to sit in silence, to give thanks for another day, to give thanks for all those in our lives who have brought us warmth and love, to give thanks for the gift of life. We know we are on our pilgrimage here, but a brief moment in time. Let us open ourselves here, now, to the process of becoming more whole, of living more fully, of giving and forgiving more freely, of understanding more completely the meaning of our lives here on this earth. Let us worship together. You're invited to join in singing. Our Sunday worship is the shared spiritual practice of our community, and we tend to the congregation during this time by sharing and honoring our joys and sorrows. If you would like to share a joy or sorrow with the congregation this morning, now is the time for sharing in the chat box. These don't get spoken out loud. They aren't part of our recording. If you'd like to send me a confidential note about your joy or sorrow, or to make a prayer request, please email me. I'll put my email address in the chat box.
mountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow. I've got pain like an arrow in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops. I've got tears like the raindrops in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul.
Our story is called Where Does God Live? Written by Holly B. and illustrated by Kim Howard. This is Hope. She's a lot like you. She loves her puppy and the color blue. She likes to laugh and play and sing, but asking questions is her favorite thing. Where does the sun go? Why does it rain? Why don't snowflakes all look the same? There were so many things Hope wanted to know, such as how many colors are in a rainbow. She'd asked her friends and her mom and dad, her grandmother Rose and her big brother Brad, the mailman, the grocer, and nice Mrs. Ying. She'd ask anyone about any old thing. One day a new question popped into her head, and she asked her mom, who was making the bed. Where does God live? Does God live nearby? Hope, God lives in heaven, way up in the sky. Now, Hope hadn't heard about heaven before, but she knew that she wanted to learn a lot more. So she went to the meadow to have a few words with sweet Mrs. Peep, her favorite bird. Have you ever seen heaven way up in the sky? Have you ever seen God when you fly far and high? I've seen clouds and stars and skies of blue, the moon and rainbows and lightning too. I've never seen heaven, though I've flown far and near. But the sky is so lovely, God has to live here. Hope thanked Mrs. Peep and went down to the stream to see Mr. Frog, who was chubby and green. Where does God live? She asked Mr. Frog. He looked up and smiled as he sat on his log. Look at the flowers, the wide open spaces, the trees and the butterflies, these beautiful places. To me, this is almost like heaven, you see. That's how I know that God lives here with me. All of a sudden, and quick as a flash, Mrs. Fish jumped up high and came down with a splash. Oh no, that's not true. That can't really be. I know that God lives in the stream here with me. This crystal blue water is lovely, I know. God lives here with me in the waters below. Hope thanked her friends and went on her way to hear what her grandmother might have to say. Her grandma was wise and her heart very pure, and she'd know the answer. Of that, Hope was sure. Does God live in heaven or down by the stream? Does God live in the water or is God a dream? Tell me, where does God live? I really must know. Oh, please, won't you tell me, my sweet Grandma Rose? Her grandmother smiled, as grandmothers can, and softly she reached out for Hope's little hand. I know you're confused, and I'm glad that you came. Now listen real close, and I'll try to explain. You know God made everything, seen and unseen, the wind and the sun and the meadow so green, flowers and stars and oceans of blue, trees, birds, and rocks, and all people too. And when God makes a person, a star, or a wave, a part of God stays with whatever God's made. So God lives in the sky, in the meadow, and stream. God lives everywhere, and God isn't a dream. God lives in the frogs and the birds and in you. When you're looking for God, it's easy to do. God lives in all things that you see, hear, or touch. God lives in all people. God's in each one of us. And when you meet people who are loving and good, they're letting God out, just as everyone could. And if you meet people who seem hateful or bad, they've forgotten God's here, and that makes God sad. God is gentle and loving and cares for us all. God gives us the strength to get up when we fall. God is always around to help us find truth, whether we're old or still in our youth. God's your best friend, Hope. God really cares. So make sure every day to take time for your prayers. How should I pray, Grandma? What should I say? I want God to hear me. What's the best way? Her grandmother hugged her and said, Precious you, just speak from your heart, Hope. It's easy to do. Tell God your wishes, your fears, and your dreams. Then thank God for all of your favorite things. Ask God to guide you in all that you do, and be thankful for all the love God sends you. Hope kissed Grandma Rose and went on her way. She had no more questions, at least for that day. And on her way home she saw God in all things, in the clouds and the flowers, and in nice Mrs. Ying. And later that night, when Hope went to bed, she closed her eyes slowly and bowed down her head. Dear God, thank you so much for this wonderful day. Thanks for the friends who showed me the way. Please help me tomorrow in all that I do, and don't forget, God, how much I love you.
In a study, participants were told to sit in a room and do nothing for 15 minutes. In that room, there was also a button which would electrically shock them. They could choose to click that button of their own will. 67% of men and 25% of women press that button. It goes to show how much we hate boredom. We hate it so much that we can choose pain over boredom. So, we try to avoid it as much as we can. Avoiding boredom has never been easier because we've got so many things to do. We try to keep doing something in our free time, whether it is scrolling through social media, watching a movie, or binge watching shows on Netflix. That makes sense because boredom is boring. We tend to think of boredom as a negative emotion. We try to avoid it as much as we can. However, science tells us that boredom can actually be great for you. A study found that boredom can result in increased creativity. In this study, people were told to sort a bowl of beans by colour, one by one. These people later performed better on an idea-generating task than a group of artists who first completed an interesting craft activity. The task was to come up with excuses for being late that wouldn't make someone look bad. The bored people performed better both in terms of quality and quantity of excuses. Thinking lets your creative juices flow and your ideas flourish. Many writers, sculptors, and musicians have expressed that boredom helps them do their work. The world might not have seen Harry Potter had J.K. Rowling not been bored on a long train ride. In an interview from 2016, she said, "I didn't have a pen and was too shy to ask anyone for one on the train, which frustrated me at the time. But when I look back, it was the best thing for me. It gave me the full 4 hours on the train to think up all the ideas for the book." Can you imagine a world without Harry Potter? Getting lost in her thoughts sparked this genius idea. In 1666, Sir Isaac Newton had to work from home for more than a year due to the Great Plague of London. Newton was a student at Cambridge, and Cambridge told students to study from their homes. And guess what he came up with in that time? He found theories on optics, calculus, motion, and gravitation. That year is called Newton's Year of Wonders. Here's how his assistant explained how he got one of his ideas. Whilst he was musing in a garden, it came into his thought that the same power of gravity, which made an apple fall from the tree to the ground, was not limited to a certain distance from the earth, but must extend much farther than was usually thought. "Why not as high as the moon?" said he to himself. He was bored under a tree, and he had a eureka moment. If he had other things to do during that period, we might have never got these groundbreaking breakthroughs in science. Along with sparking ideas, boredom can make you more productive. Boredom doesn't mean you're not doing anything. If your mind is not occupied with social media, you could be planning about things you'll do in the future. Your future pursuits have to be thought out, and boredom lets you do just that. This is called autobiographical planning. It involves the identification and organisation of steps required to get to a specific future outcome. So put your phone inside your pocket and get bored. Thinking is great for you. And when you're bored, you think. Remember that when you pull out your phone or start binge watching shows on Netflix, you might be missing a chance of getting life-changing ideas.
Comedian and performer Bo Burnham, in his recent Netflix show, has a song called "Welcome to the Internet," a critique of the good and bad available to us through social media and the like. I would play it for you, but it's pretty vulgar for church and even disturbing. Near the end of the song, Burnham laughs like a supervillain and asks, "Could I interest you in everything, all of the time? A little bit of everything, all of the time. Apathy's a tragedy and boredom is a crime. Anything and everything, all of the time." It's a pretty good summary of the internet. Everything available all of the time. The line that jumped out at me the first time I heard it, boredom is a crime. When I was a young child, when I couldn't figure out what to do, and in particular, if I didn't have something to read, I would complain to my mother that I was bored. My complaining was not okay with my mom, and although I don't recall being punished, I was scolded. And I learned that being bored or announcing that I was bored was not okay. As an adult, I came to feel that being bored is kind of absurd, demonstrating an embarrassing lack of curiosity. The world is filled with books and movies and museums and places to go and things to do. And the internet puts it all at our fingertips. Any question you have, you can look up on Google or YouTube to see what possible answers might be. So Burnham's words, "Boredom is a crime," clearly a criticism, pulled me up short. Are we losing something important in our attempts to drink from the fire hose of information and art and never-ending stimulation that's available to us now? As the video we just watched suggests, yes, we are losing something when we always have something to do. Of course, we know that rest and relaxation are important. I've preached on those as well. But I imagine that many of you, like me, have a list of restful and relaxing activities to do. Visiting with friends, reading a book, listening to music, playing a game, going to the beach, etc., etc., etc. Always something to do. Boredom has a variety of definitions, but the one I'm using is synchronous with what we just heard in the video from the YouTube channel, The Art of Improvement. That boredom is simply having nothing to do or nothing interesting to do. The lesson from the video is that boredom, giving ourselves time to do nothing, helps us be more productive and creative. And the really good news is that it doesn't take much time at all to see a benefit. Studies show that doing a boring task for 30 minutes results in increased creativity when presented with a problem to solve. Sounds great. We just need to schedule some nothingness into our daily lives and reap the benefits. But what about the study showing that a substantial number of people were willing to self-administer a mild electric shock to help pass the time rather than sit with nothing to do for just 15 minutes? And it wasn't just one shock, you could do as many as you wanted. And so one person in that study self-administered over 100 shocks in the 15 minutes. So like, wow. That study touches on a more complex definition of boredom and how it connects with our full lives. A recent Washington Post article by Miri Kim reports on research that has explored boredom as an inherent trait known as boredom proneness, which has a whole host of negative associations. People who experience boredom more frequently and with greater intensity are more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, gamble compulsively, binge eat, drop out of school, drive recklessly, and suffer from anxiety or depression. Studies conducted during the coronavirus pandemic also found that individuals high in boredom proneness had a greater tendency to break the rules of social distancing. In this case, boredom is defined much more complexly than just having nothing to do. Boredom proneness is defined as a distressing emotional state that combines feelings of restlessness and lethargy arising from situations that are no longer satisfying or stimulating. Other words for this might be like malaise. So there's a difference between the momentary boredom that comes from having nothing to do for a window of time and this boredom proneness that makes it hard to find meaning and pleasure in activities that typically bring meaning and pleasure. Those with boredom proneness aren't likely to see a benefit from 30 minutes of inactivity. They're already struggling with sort of existential feelings of boredom. And if you recognize this description of boredom proneness as something you or someone you know lives with, I encourage you to learn more about it. And you can Google boredom proneness and start there. There's actually a scale you can take to measure your own boredom proneness. But for the rest of us, those of us with lives that have felt overscheduled and overfull, with too much stimulation and too many choices, building in some time to do nothing might be a welcome relief. This is a particularly relevant topic for us as we are figuring out how to live in a post-vaccine world. I've heard from many of you already how you're glad to be able to return to activities that have been off limits for so long, but you are also cautious and concerned about losing some of the blessings of the pandemic. Things like solitude, time at home, time to read and bake and garden. None of us missed driving in heavy traffic. Those of you who have worked well at home hope to continue to enjoy the benefits of working from home. It's not just nice to take breaks in the middle of the workday, it's actually beneficial and required by law, by the way, and so much nicer to do at home than in an office building. It's smart not to automatically return to everything you were doing pre-pandemic. Even if you were perfectly happy before the pandemic and your life was perfectly balanced and organized, it's over a year later now, and you've changed. We are all changed, and it will take some time to rediscover ourselves and what we want our lives to be. So let me also advise you that if doing nothing for 30 minutes makes you fall asleep, that's okay. That means you needed some sleep. Sleep is important too, and getting enough sleep and resting ourselves is as important for our health and well-being as anything we do. As you continue to discover what your post-vaccine life is like, I hope you will keep time for boredom in your schedule, or build time for boredom into your schedule. Boredom lets your mind rest and wander. This is how creativity blossoms. This is what opens the door to self-reflection. And this is when thoughts you've been ignoring, important thoughts, will come to the surface. These gifts of creativity, self-reflection, and epiphany will help you in days and weeks to come. May it be so. You're invited to join in singing. Whoops. The Sunday offering is an expression of the generosity that makes our congregational life possible. As Buddhist teacher Joseph Goldstein has said, it's important to understand that generosity is a practice. It's not just a single event. It's a quality in our hearts and minds that we can develop and cultivate. Please text your donation to Chalice. If you haven't texted a donation before, know that once you text the amount, the numbers, you'll get a reply with a link to follow to enter your credit card information. And if you've entered that information previously when you've donated, you won't need to enter it again. If your Sunday donation is part of your pledge payment, please be sure to indicate the word pledge after the dollar amount. And also know that you can make a text donation at any time. It doesn't need to be just during the worship service. The phone number will be on screen in a moment, and I'll also put it in the chat box. Please give generously. Please join in dedicating our offering with words of affirmation. As Unitarian Universalists, we gather to affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. I keep waiting for the pandemic to be over, and it's not going to happen like that. And I've known that for months, but we're really living that right now. I'm just really, I knew we would know people who had a breakthrough illness, but to hear that during Joys and Sorrows really hit me. It's a small percentage of people who will have breakthrough illness, but when 200 million people have been vaccinated, that small percentage is still thousands of people who will have breakthrough illness. And we don't know yet if the Delta variant will result in a higher percentage of breakthrough illness. So that's something we'll be, that time will tell. There's a lot of things that time will tell. But I think we're at the point now, at least in terms of the public health guidance we're being given, that each of us has to decide for ourselves and make our own risk assessment in thinking about what we're comfortable doing. And so, you know, the only way at church that we could keep you safe forever would be to never meet in person again. And we're not going to do that. So this is part of like my very long minister's message in the August newsletter. So you'll read this, and I think I'm going to send it as an email, a separate email to the congregation as well. You heard me just use the term post-vaccine instead of post-pandemic. I don't know when we'll be post-pandemic. It might be years from now. But we are post-vaccine, and we are a highly vaccinated community. And so we're going to begin to have times when we're together and in person, and each of you will have to decide if you're comfortable and willing to come in person, or if you if your risk assessment is that you need to stay at home, and we will try and do as much as we can to make everything available in multiple ways, so that you aren't having to make choices about whether or not you participate, but how you will participate. That's my hope going forward. So all of this is prelude to telling you that on August 15th, next month, we're going to have a worship service in Felicita Park in order to have a blessing of the animals. This isn't so much really a step to being back in person as I love doing the blessing of the animals in the park. So all of the other services in August will be online. It's just August 15th. We don't have a way to stream that live because of the Wi-Fi in the park is poor. For those of you who can't come or don't want to come, but have pets that you would like blessed, I'm going to have another time that we can do that online together. We'll record that. We'll record the park service, and then we're going to put them together into one video, and we'll post that on YouTube for us to all enjoy and share together. I'm also going to ask you to send me photos of deceased pets, and we'll put those into a video that becomes part of that video as well. So this is sort of part of it will take place in person at one time, part of it will take place online a different time, and we'll record them both and put them together. We're going to ask that everyone who comes to the park is masked. We have children under 12 in our community, children who I hope will come. We have immunocompromised people in our community, and as we learn about breakthrough illnesses, we don't know concretely if vaccinated people can transmit the virus. So being masked together at worship, which is our biggest and our most public gathering, and also the time that we won't know everybody's status, everybody's vaccination status when we gather. We're not going to check that or ask about that. So being masked is a way we can help keep each other safe at that big gathering. So there will be all these details will be in the newsletter and in emails coming to you. But for those of you who have been yearning to be together for worship, I hope this is something fun to look forward to. And we're also going to figure out a way to indicate, probably with a sticker on your clothing, green, yellow, or red, the amount of touch that you're comfortable with. So you can have a green sticker if you are up for hugging, a yellow sticker if you're more comfortable with an elbow bump or a fist bump, or a red sticker if you would love to wave hello to your friends from a few feet away. So these are all things. We aren't going to have refreshments. We're not going to worry about that at the park. There won't be childcare available, and there won't be an online social hour that day. So yeah, but we haven't seen, I was starting to tear up imagining us singing "You Are Welcome Here" together at long last. So I hope that's something good to look forward to. Yeah, we have a long ways to go. But we're going to continue to hold each other and be there for each other the best we can as we figure out what this new post-vaccine world is like. You're invited to join in singing.
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down. Feel like shouting, hallelujah. Since I laid my burden down, feel like shouting, hallelujah, since I laid my burden down. Life is sweeter, so much sweeter, since I laid my burden down. Life is sweeter, so much sweeter.
Our closing words come from Cheryl Block. As we go forward into this frightening, exhilarating, confusing, miraculous world, may we offer our comfort to the afflicted, our love to those who are lonely, and our wish for all to be safe. May it be so. You are invited to close our time together by singing the well, and everyone is invited to coffee hour.